folks, Steve from Prima Coffee here. Today we're taking a look at something a little bit different. We're actually going to take a look at an iPad app today, the companion app to the Acaia brewing skill. So I'm just going to open it up right here. It takes a couple seconds to load, but this is definitely something that we want to take a look at because it adds a ton of functionality to the Acaia brewing skill. Now this app is available on both iOS and Android platforms, so I can open it up on my phone too. It's almost the same thing. The versions aren't quite the same. We have 2.3 here on the iPad and 2.0 on Android. They try and keep them pretty close in terms of functionality and in terms of releases, so they're pretty active in terms of developing the app and making sure that the releases go out pretty soon after one another, if not as close as possible. But anyway, so we're going to take a look at just what is going on with the app here, because there's a lot to take a look at, and we're going to do a quick little brew to sort of show off what kind of functionality we have there. Now, when you first open the app, if you have made a user account, you will see what's called the feed. Now, the app has some social functionality built in, so you can take a look at your friends' brews or what have you. Otherwise, you will see the remote scale view. So the scale has Bluetooth 4.0 functionality built right in, so any mobile device that has Bluetooth should be able to connect to it if it's a modern enough version of Bluetooth. And once it's connected, you basically get a live readout of the scale, and you have the ability to also tear or otherwise just sort of play with the scale. So the remote scale view is basically the quickest way to get up and brewing. So if you just want to get your scale out, get your phone out, and get right into a brew, you know exactly what your parameters need to be. You can do it right from here. It has a built-in timer. You can run your timer, pause, reset. You'll see as you pour, you'll see your water weight increase, and you can actually change this little model here. There's a Clever, a V60, and a Chemex. This doesn't actually have any effect on the functionality of this mode. It just sort of changes the graphics, kind of an aesthetic thing. Now, some of the more interesting stuff is actually accessed from different modes here. So you'll see we have the converter, which is a really handy tool. So if I dump some coffee in my Chemex here, you'll see it shows up live on the scale or on the app, and it displays right here. Now I can say, well, I want that to be my bean weight. I'll just hit this check mark here, and you'll see it automatically converts my 1:15 ratio with 27 grams of beans to 409 grams of water. Now, if I want to change that ratio, I just tap right there and say I want to brew 1:16 instead. I'd have 436.8 grams of water. And from there, I can tear my scale. You can also use that readout, like if you want to weigh, how much your kettle or how much capacity your kettle has, and you set it on the scale. You can even change the water. It'll show up here, and you can set it to the water instead of the bean weight. So converter is a really nice tool, super handy to have, so you don't have to do those mental gymnastics to figure out how much water you need to brew a certain weight of coffee. We can also go into this coffee note mode. Now this has a couple of different options. You have a coffee shot, which is basically just sort of an image and some notes that you can share through the Acaia social settings. You have a brewing print, which is kind of like a recorded graph of your brew, which is really interesting. We'll get right to that in a second. And then you have your bean stash. So you can basically create and share the beans that you have on hand. So you can take a picture of the bag, you can add tasting notes, you can say whether it's a green bean that you're roasting yourself or a roasted bean that you bought. You can rate it, you can add the names, you can add all kinds of variety information here. You can even say who roasted it, like the actual person who roasted it, what the roastery was, the roast level, all this sort of stuff. And then you can also set it to public if you'd like to share that you've just added it to your stash of beans. Now, in the feed view, you have a bunch of settings down below where you can discover new users. Like if you think your friend Matt, has an account, you can try and search their email. or you can say like, oh, I love that, that famous barista. I'm sure he has an Acaia account. You can search them up as well. Again, you have these settings where you can add your various social prints and whatnot, and then you have your profile settings where you can also create all these all the same sort of settings that you can in those other menus, but there's also more of a list view here as well. So we already have this Kenya. We rated it. We added some tasting notes. We entered the information like the roaster and everything. It's not set to public, but you can also create like a note or edit it, and basically just add all the coffees that you have on hand. It's really handy. You also have profile settings here, so you can change your name, you can change your location, add all this information, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, or nothing at all. You can add an image, all that kind of fun stuff. So there's a lot of like really fun features built into this. It's kind of Acaia is trying to sort of build a community around the scale, so you can sort of share your endeavors and your brews and that sort of thing, which is, it's really fun. There's not really a lot of that going on in the coffee community at large as it is. So it's really nice to see kind of a refreshing take on connecting the coffee community through the devices that they use most regularly anyway. So let's take a look at a brew. I'm going to go and create a coffee note for a brewing print. Now the first thing that I'll want to change is I'm using a Chemex, not a V60, so I'm going to set it to Chemex. And the reason I'll do that is if I go into this is the global settings menu. There's a lot of interesting stuff. You can add a password. You can change your share settings. There's some scale settings in here as well. Auto off. You can see like your battery. You can change the temperature units and all that. But in timer settings here, you can go in and you can select from a wide variety of brewing tools and even some custom ones, and basically set up your typical brewing profiles. So we have this set up for about a 2 minute and 45 second brew. You can go in, you can change all these numbers, really easy to do. And then you can even change the sort of the global parameters where, well, maybe I don't want a first pour, I can get rid of that. There's always going to be this ready timer, just a 3-second countdown to kind of let you know that, okay, the app is about to start when you're doing your brewing. But you can change all this. You can even add on extra stuff. So it's a really kind of robust tool that allows you to fully customize how you like to brew it. It'll give you some default settings right from the get-go, but they're really easy to change, really easy to tweak to the way that you prefer to brew. So we've just got a pretty basic Chemex recipe there. So if we go back to our brewing print, we have Chemex. We're going to select that Kenya from the bean stash. We have a 1:16 ratio. This grind is actually an arbitrary number. You can set it to kind of whatever you want. So let's say that you're using a Baratza. A lot of Baratzas have like a 0 to 40 on the collar. So you can set it to like, I ground it on a 24 on my Virtuoso. Here we've actually used kind of like an 8.4 on an EK43. So you can set it to whatever is most relevant to you. If your grinder doesn't actually have numerical settings, you can kind of ignore this field. It doesn't actually affect how the app works. It's just sort of good information to store for later. So, if you're like, well, I ground on an 8.4 that time, I probably should have ground on a 9, then you'll be able to look at that and go back and kind of remember what happened. We have temperature. You're just going to set that to 205. Total time is automatically calculated. Unfortunately, my bean is lost, so I'm going to set that back. I think it was at 27 point something. I don't know. Then this will pre-fill. Again, based on the ratio, it will pre-fill with the amount of water that I need. So I'm just going to tear the scale for fun. And then I can go into the brew print mode. Now this is kind of a really interesting part of the application because it allows you to record your brew in a way that most of us aren't really used to. What we have here is basically a time-based graph, and there's going to be 2 fields that show up while I'm brewing. You'll see those in a second. Then we also have remaining time, which we can tap to change to elapsed time. Both of those are good data points. And we can also take the weight and the tare weight, so we can read the differences in weight over time. Now I'm actually going to get this started. I got some water and I got some coffee, so I'm going to hit the start button and get my brew going. So it gives me a 3-second countdown timer, and I'm going to start my first pour. I'm just going to use twice my ground mass, so about 45. I guess I went over a little bit. So what we see here is this blue line is the total amount of water weight that I've added. This gray line that's kind of all over the place shows the rate of pouring, which is a really interesting metric to have because you can see not only how evenly you're adding water, but maybe when you take a look at the sort of global brew at the end, sort of like where you might have been a little bit heavier than you needed to be, or where you might have added a little bit too much agitation. So you can take a look at that again once you're done with your brew, and you can say, oh, maybe I should slow down my pour, or even maybe I should speed up my pour because I didn't hit my target wait in time. Now you'll notice the remaining time is actually for the section at hand. So my second pour here I set to about a minute, so I'm just going to pour really, really slowly. Just like a regular Chemex brew. I can see that I'm not really pouring super evenly, so maybe I'll slow it down a little bit and try and get more even pour rate. My target weight is 438, and I know that I have one more pour, so I'm going to really slow this down. I want to get maybe 100 grams in that last pour, so I'm going to go to like 330, hopefully in the last 10 seconds here. There we go. So 330. Now, you'll notice that each section as it comes up will have a little tag, and this is kind of scaling live. So I'm waiting for 10 seconds, and then I'm going to do a final pour of about 100 grams over like 45 seconds. So I'm going to pour nice and slow, wash my grounds down a little bit. I'll probably hit that 438 a little bit early, but that's all right because I still need some drain time as well. All right. Just a few more grams. There we go. I went a little bit over. That's not such a big deal. The one drawback of going a little bit over like this is that the graph will actually cut off at your maximum weight. It's probably a kink that needs to be worked out over time, but if I pour any more water, if I were to dump even like an extra 100 grams, this blue line would just stop at the top. They've done that mainly to kind of make the interface a little bit more simple, I think. So you don't sort of infinitely have to scale the vertical if you pour way over. It just sort of pre-scales it for ease of use. But really, I mean, it's a super simple app to use, but it gives you so much information and it's really valuable. While I'm waiting for this to drain, I'm just going to tell it that I'm done by hitting the option there. Now, while you're brewing, that done button actually is a skip button. It allows you to skip the phase of the brew that you're in. So if I wanted to skip that waiting period and I just want to keep pouring, I could hit skip and go right to the final pour stage. And it will not add extra time. It won't take that 10 seconds of waiting and add it to the 45 seconds of the final pour, for instance. It will just do the 45 seconds that's programmed in. So it'll skip over the entire period and just move on to the next stage. Now this graph is really, really interesting because it's interactive. So I can stretch it, basically doing a pinch to zoom, and I can look in at just sort of like micro increments. I can go all the way down to the seconds and say like, oh man, 72 seconds I poured a little bit faster than 75, but that's not necessarily useful data. But what is really nice is just be able to look at this and say, well, my pours were relatively consistent over time. I had some heavy spots in the middle, and right at the end I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. I dropped down, maybe I dribbled a little bit too much. My overall ramp, however, is pretty steady. I had some pretty steady pouring over time. That's really relevant and nice data to see. If there were some really serious faults here, like if there was a really high peak because I just dumped 50 grams of water on at a time, you'd be able to see that, and you'd be able to, you'd be able to use that. Like, say you're using these scales to train your baristas or even some customers if you're running a class or something like that. You can take that information and say, like, all right, well, here's a point of improvement that we can do. Like, we can say, this pours too fast or this pours too slow, or you're not adding enough water for the time allotted in your brew. You can take this information and really turn it around to your benefit. So there's a lot of potential here for allowing you to improve your brews, and that's really where we see the value. Is there's a lot of useful aspects of this app that transform this from a brewing scale into a really helpful just training device, and something that can really fit into the idea that as sort of specialty coffee enthusiasts, we're always looking to learn. So this is a great metric for learning. Now there's a couple other things here. Obviously it's stored all of our preset points. Like we had this 1:16 ratio. We were brewing a Chemex. We had so many grams of beans, and this is the water. We ended up with 440 grams. We ended up with a 3-minute 18 brew time. And we can rate this, so let's say, oh man, this is a really good brew, we can give it 5 stars. We can set it to public to share it. And then we can also add notes, so if I say, oh, this is really good, I can type it in here, and then I can choose which sort of social networks I want to share it to as well. So you can integrate with Facebook, Twitter, and this is actually Evernote. So you can integrate with these social accounts and post your brews to there as well, while also posting to the Acaia social feed as well. We can also add an image. So say I want to take a picture real quick of my Chemex. You can use that photo and say, here's my Chemex brew, and it will appear with the live graph, which we can still interact with. So if I want to share that, I can just go ahead and say share. It'll share it to Acaia successfully, and then I can go right back to my home feed. So that is, by and large, version 2.3 of the iOS version of the Acaia app. Now there's a good chance that some of these features will change or alter a little bit over time, or even new features will be added in the future. So we're going to try and update as needed, but for now this is pretty much the state of the Acaia app. And we're really impressed with the features that it has, and we're really happy to have this as part of our product catalog. So thanks for watching.